So when you've worked at the same place for a few years, you get to know the cars in the parking lot, right? So then when one day a motorcycle you've never seen before just like suddenly appears, of course, you've got to investigate. And that's pretty much how Daniel Ritz and I became friends. After instantly bonding over motorcycles, from there he dragged me all across the state of Idaho on two wheels, heading all the way to Yellowstone and back in what was one of the most fun, if exhausting, trips I've ever taken. But that's pretty much how Danny rolls. He's always down for an adventure to squeeze every ounce of experience out of life. Whether that's bombing up and down the Pacific Coast Highway on his Triumph Scrambler as his solo means of transportation, working on his other passion, fly fishing, as the conservation editor for Swing the Fly, or creating Jack's Experience Trading Company, helping people discover their wild side by taking them out to wild places. Trust me, he's really good at that. This is Daniel Ritz. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Daniel Ritz, you are on Driven to Ride. How are you, sir?
I'm so good. I'm so stoked to be here, Mark. This is really fun. I miss you, buddy.
I miss you too. So full disclosure, We've been friends for 6-7 years now, probably.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and the way we met is that where we worked on our day job together at the radio station, I noticed when you started working there was a Triumph Scrambler sitting out in the parking lot, and I go, whose is that? And then I see this guy with, like a button-down shirt and some jeans and some Red Wing shoes. And I go, who's this guy? And so I mustered up the courage to say, hey, man, is that your Scrambler? And then the rest is history. So.
Yeah, I feel like that was our first date. It was very like, hi, I'm new here. Like it was a movie moment, to say the least.
Right.
And I've talked to you who knows how many days since,
Exactly. But to start it off properly, I want you in your own words to tell me what do people kind of know you for? Maybe what's your claim to fame?
I don't know if I have a claim to fame, and honestly, people probably don't know me, but I hope that one day people know the work that I've done. I'm a writer and a conservationist.
Okay.
I work in communications. I live in Idaho still, where you and I met.
Right.
And so I work full time in a variety of capacities. I wear a lot of different hats that are really focused on challenging folks' kind of traditional values on wild places, wild fish, and public lands. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and it takes me a lot of beautiful places, and I meet a lot of great folks, and it's tiring and can be frustrating, but it's work that at the end of the day, like I rarely, if ever, go to bed wondering what I did that day that was fulfilling. And so it kind of keeps the batteries going. But yeah, so hopefully people eventually come across something that I've written and find it at least interesting enough. And I always like to say that I don't like to tell people what to think, but I hope that it makes them think.
Sure. No, I love it. And in case there's any confusion about whether or not that's related to motorcycles, I would say that there's a lot of public lands, a lot of fire service roads, a lot of adventure riding, off-road riding that happens, especially out there in the Great West and the Intermountain West. And, I'd say your focus is maybe more on rivers and streams and marine life and stuff. But I imagine you probably touch a lot of the public lands, BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and maybe some off-road trails as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Forest Service, wilderness spaces, Bureau of Land Management, everything from local easements. Wild people enjoy wild places and wildlife, and I would consider myself one of those. And that can really, I think we're very quick to segment things and people. Mm-hmm. Everybody has to have an adjective. I'm a this, I'm a that, what have you. And generally we have more shared common interests than we do differences. And so while I may be going somewhere, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the storytelling, I might be going somewhere to enjoy a wild stream with fish in it per se, but like that takes a road that was curated and worked with the National Forest Service. And if people aren't advocating for their wishes, which can be beautiful, beautiful national forests that have winding roads that go through them for us to enjoy on motorcycles, or it could be campsites that we could pull over on the side to grab a night on a big trip. And again, like that doesn't matter whether you're a big game hunter, a fisherman, a motorcyclist, just a casual day hiker. it's all there. And so
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to have seen quite a few of those places on a motorcycle, which is a very cool way to absorb it. And so, yeah, I'm sure we'll get into some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. But let's start from the beginning. Because I think you kind of have a unique motorcycle history. How did you even get into motorcycles in the first place?
Yeah. So it's probably 2010,
Okay.
2011, no, probably 2012 actually. And I am working in newspapers. I'm living in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Maryland. I'm a swamp creature from the Eastern Shore. Born in Baltimore, grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Go Ravens! But I was living. You kind of chase around work in the
Sure.
news media world, and so I had found myself. I'd stumbled across going from being a beat writer to a reporter to an editor, managing editor at this family of newspapers in Southern California. And I had been a surf bro for a really long time.
Yeah.
I've pretty much lived and died by the waves and the tides. And that was my whole fix. And I was a little bit burnt out on it, as some people do in your kind of first teenage love. You know, you don't know how to handle it. And I was burning out a little bit on that and was really kind of exasperated and looking for different outlets. And I love kind of niche cultures and communities. And I was living in San Clemente, California, and there was a very small home-owned shop. You love San Clemente, I know this.
Love San Clemente.
There's a great town. Shout out San Clemente. Wasn't home for me, but I'll go back any day. There was a small motorcycle shop up the street from where I was living, and I saw some really cool bikes. I think they were kind of cliche cafe racer sort of style, very stylistic sort of looking.
Sure. Another point for San Clemente.
And it pegged my interest. And
Okay.
I got looking around, and then long story short, I wound up living with a guy. His name is Randy, who took me in before I was moving to Boise and put me up in his kind of ADU unit in the back. And he was like a long time motorcyclist, and he had a Bonneville. He had a Triumph Bonneville.
Yep.
And it was this beautiful bike that he didn't ride enough because he was getting older, but he talked to me about all the stories and all the places that it had been. And so I started looking at Triumphs. And for me, being an outdoorsman and a sportsman and wanting to be a little lighter footed, I just saw the Scrambler as a good mix of, it's heavy enough to get me on the big roads and for big trips, but it's light enough for me to still move around a little bit. I like to call it a Forest Service road bike.
Yeah, for sure.
It's still a 900cc bike. Like you're not like running down moguls and stuff on it, but I could get it into the dirt a little bit and feel comfortable. And yeah, I had a 2011 Triumph Scrambler in that like dark green color before they got a little more plasticky looking. And to this day, it's still the most beautiful bike I've ever seen.
It's a great motorcycle, man. And it does kind of suit, just knowing you personally, there is kind of that, well, if I want to be in the city and ride in urban, I can. If I need to get out there and turn the volume down, as it were, you can do that as well.
I was in the midst of what I jokingly call my personal recession. And so I could only have one. And when I got that bike, I very quickly, I think I had a truck for maybe 6 weeks after I bought that motorcycle. Mm-hmm. And I went solo motorcycle for almost 3 years. That was my only source of transportation. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was working as the newspaper man, running around on my motorcycle, showing up to city council meetings, or, the local, county court, or riding up to LA, going down. I didn't take my surfboards on it, but I would go visit friends that had something for me to borrow down in San Diego or whatever. It was a good patch of time, man. I mean, I lived in San Clemente and I worked in a town called Dana Point, probably about 20 minutes up the road, and you're just riding along the one. Again, it wasn't like home for me, but like a really beautiful community and obviously a very beautiful place.
Yeah.
And what a great place to get to know a motorcycle, just to really like enjoy being outside.
You've got so many roads. I mean, you can take it, up into the mountains. You can take it up PCH, up the one or whatever. You can get on, the interstate if you need to with the 900 cc's if necessary. But, what was that like, just riding solo? I mean, did you ever think about or run into a situation where you needed a car? I mean, thankfully down in Southern California, you didn't really have to worry about the weather too much, but did you ever run into challenges just having just a motorcycle?
Sure. I mean, all the time. But I think that's kind of what I was looking for.
Sure.
Like there's a part of me that, um, and I'm not trying to throw shade on, like, I'd love to have a Sprinter van. I'd love to
Sure.
have a Sprinter van. Like, van life looks awesome done right.
Right.
But this was the second home owner buying down by the beach. Everybody's got a Sprinter van. They're hanging out at Santa Onofre all day. Like, there was a lot of low hanging fruit shade to be thrown at, the Sprinter culture and van life.
Sure. Sure.
You're not really camping, or you're not really at any risk. You just take your home and you put it somewhere else, which, again, if I could do it and afford it, I probably would. But like, I don't know. I was pretty poor and like looking for ways to go about and to get those same, I hated being excluded from things and feeling like that was out of my reach. And so I really, as I tend to do in my life, rejected that and went the opposite way. If the flock is going left, you veer right. And so I said, like, I'm going to go to a motorcycle, and I, like, anything that I need to carry more than I can put in a backpack, I probably don't need.
Love it. I mean, mad respect for it.
I kind of committed to that. And so I really focused on, and I had done some like ultralight backpacking and ultralight trips and things. And so I was pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But, well, I was good enough, I guess. There's people that are
you could survive. Yeah.
Yeah. I shouldn't, that was quite a claim. Yeah. And I just really committed to being as light footed as I could, and to being mobile, and the things that you can't have with you, how important are they? And if that means that you need to like make a trip home, like maybe you need to, got to go see the dog, got to go like make another lap, got to go check in. That's okay. Do that. And otherwise, like, grab it on the road. You meet people when you have to stop to grab a drink instead of carrying everything in your cooler in your car. You stop by a cool town. You stop by a place like Pickles Pub. We'll get into that.
Yes, we will. Well, so let me ask you this. Were there any advantages you think that you had as riding a motorcycle all the time over having a car in California?
Gas money.
Yeah. Yeah, because gas ain't cheap out there.
No, I don't know. I don't know if there were real advantages, but I'll say that I took a lot away from it.
Mm-hmm.
I took a lot away from not having to sort through all my things all the time and pack and repack and having to worry about, it's pretty relieving to just go like, okay, I'm only going to have these couple of changes of clothes if I'm going to go on the road for a week and go on a fishing trip. I'm only going to have this, and I have my one bag. And you and I have talked a lot about gear and packing and stuff. And like, I'm a bag nerd. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that are into stuff like that. Where pockets are placed and where the zippers are, like, that stuff matters. And it can really, it's fun to dial in your stuff like that. And it's less things with a higher quality experience. And that's kind of what I'm all about.
Yeah, no, I love it. It makes perfect sense.
But probably not advantageous. I don't think anybody would say that it was like, oh, this is the best idea.
Well, if I had to say one thing about you, is that you definitely don't take the easy route. So,
well, I'm glad to hear you think that, Mark. I try. Yeah.
Well, I know you don't take the easy route because you've taken me on the hard route multiple times.
Yeah, man.
much to my exhaustion, but also satisfaction. So it's definitely worth it.
A tired life, live best.
I live tired. Somebody said that the other day. I subscribe to that, but I know you, and correct me if I'm wrong, before you got on the Scrambler and were in California, you had two-wheeled experience before that though, right?
Yeah. There's no free lunch. I'd gotten myself into trouble. I was in Indonesia the first time. This is probably 2010 or 11, maybe. We went to Indonesia and did like a 3-month stint surfing across the islands in Indonesia. And we had been there for nearly the entire trip and a couple of days left to go. And I got tire tapped, just rolling around from home, grabbing something from the store, I think. And
you were on a scooter, right?
I was on a scooter, motorbike, a small, like, who knows, somewhere between 50 and 100 cc. Little thing. And I'm going down a hill, and I got tire tapped by somebody following too close behind me.
Mhm.
I woke up 3 weeks later in the hospital in Bali, where I probably got better care than I would have on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Honestly, I woke up to this like beautiful German plastic surgeon doctor who's like, "Yeah, we like fixed your face and you're full of metal now. So this and that and all sorts of things are metal." And then I kind of recreated that scenario in my lower body a couple years later in Indonesia. But yeah, it's fun, man. Staying light footed and running around different places and being nimble. I think is the way to go about it. So spent a little bit of time in South Africa, El Salvador. I would really love to get down to South America proper and do that, but I
Sure. Yeah.
haven't done that yet. But I don't want to claim that I have a ton, but a little bit. I've tasted the flavors, and
Yeah.
I've paid some dues.
Tasted the asphalt in Indonesia. Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense.
Well, so they tell me. I don't remember it, but
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Did you
yeah,
have any reservations about like getting, because it sounds like that happened pretty close
before,
after well, before you got the Scrambler, but not
yeah,
too much before. So did you have any reservations about like getting back on a bike like that or a two-wheeled machine?
no, no,
Really?
uh, and I can't. I don't know, Mark. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why.
Sure.
It would make sense. Um, but like accidents happen,
Yeah.
and I think I'm a firm believer that most things are user error.
Okay. That's fair.
Like my first thing is to be accountable to like, let's check in. Like it was probably my fault. Like
Mm-hmm.
on my particular occasions, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so and that was very obvious in those situations.
Sure.
And so it didn't really have a lot of impact on I haven't really thought about that before, honestly, or at least not recently. But no, it didn't really impact me too much. Like I sort of put it in the category of like, this was outside of my control
Yeah.
and it didn't impact the things that I can.
More just bad luck rather than scaring yourself off of it,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. And most things are not bad luck. Like most things we tend to influence to go, one way or another for
Yeah.
us. Like, I don't really think that, I like the phrase cosmic coincidence. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're in some way involved in our consequences, positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually our fault.
Yeah.
But in this one, it didn't hit me that way. So no, it didn't really impact me too much. Picking the bike back up again.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And then so to kind of move forward in the timeline, you brought a motorcycle with you to Boise. And that's how we met and we bonded over motorcycles. And we took a couple of trips. Always wish it would have been a couple more, but it happens. I want you and this is just for my own vanity, I'll admit it. Tell me about the first time that we rode together. What did you take away from that experience? Or like, what was your kind of impression?
Oh man. So what was our first trip? Was our first trip that little lap we did up to like around the loop at Emmett and all that? Was that our first like
No, we went up to McCall.
together?
We went up to McCall.
Oh, we went up to McCall. That's right. Well, first of all, you're a significantly more skilled motorcyclist than I am.
Well, thank you.
That's just
not planned. That's
goes without saying. You have significantly more experience, and
sure.
I really appreciated watching how you read lines through turns, and I selfishly. This is very selfish, but my biggest takeaway with going along with you, I was like, I have so much to learn about motorcycling from this guy. And I really enjoyed the trip because, you're one of my best buddies and I'll always enjoy like any shred of time that we can scrape together to hang out and, have a beer and catch up, and we did plenty of that. But on the ride, your vision for the lines that you draw and how much earlier you set up everything. And that has really, to this day, translated to how I look at waterways. I do a lot of rafting nowadays, and I do like fishing guides where like you're always looking 2 or 3 moves ahead.
Okay.
Instead of looking underneath your feet, because that's too late at that point. And you think you have it right. And then you go with somebody that's been doing it for a decade or more longer than you. And so I really really enjoyed that scenario of watching you ahead of me and really sort of like watching how you read things and going like, oh, I need to like open it up here, close the gap here, start, slow it down, speed up. Like it was a real, I mean, it sounds very fundamental, but that's where I was.
Sure.
I don't consider myself any sort of skilled motorcyclist at all. Like I'm along for the ride, man. I'm there. Like, God, I'd lose my own head if it wasn't attached, which is like why motorcycling is cool for me. Cause you have to focus on it. And I'm really like, I love tapping into that experience of having that singular focus. But if I could stare at the birds while I was doing it, you bet your ass I would be.
Yeah. Well, and just to now that my ego's been soothed a little bit here, I will say that one of the great mistakes that I made when having somebody follow me was when there's a big pass up to get to McCall. You have to go over this pass in like from Boise into Horseshoe Bend. And we were coming back around or whatever. And I told you at the stop sign in Horseshoe Bend, hey, I like to take this pass.
Oh, when we were coming home and you went, yeah.
I said, I like to take this pass a little fast. So if you run into trouble, catch up. And I didn't think of anything. I didn't think about it at the time, but afterwards.
You said if you run into any trouble, just flag me down, which is impossible when I'm behind you because you're advertising that you're going to take this at, breakneck.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm 500 yards behind you. I'm thinking like, good thing I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit of an idiot here and there. So, but yeah, that was kind of our practice ride to at that point one of the biggest trips I had ever taken on a motorcycle was our trip east through Idaho and into Yellowstone.
Was that one of the bigger trips you'd taken at that point? I knew you didn't have a lot of like overnight camping experience, but was that one of like the bigger motorcycle trips you'd done?
Yeah, and aside from Sturgis this year, that was probably the longest one-day trip I had ever done and the longest like trip I had ever taken. So, we did, I think 300 miles in a day on the way back.
Yeah, that was a big day. That was
a haul. Yeah. And to go to Sturgis, I did 560 in one day on the way there and on the way back. And that was like only halfway.
Yeah.
So
was it flat the whole way?
Mostly there. You get a little bit of elevation once you get into like Eastern Iowa or Western Iowa, Western Minnesota, South Dakota does have some good elevation, but yeah, it was a lot of just holding steady. But, I don't even remember I'm sure it was your idea to go to Yellowstone on motorcycles. Like where did that come from?
I think the Southwest Montana, Eastern Idaho landscape is just an absolutely remarkable place. And
for sure,
I thought it would be it's just one of those ideas where it's like, oh, this will be a really fun trip. And then you start to work back from like, you and I were very quick to go like, oh, that's a great idea. We're definitely going to go to Yellowstone and we're going to go hang out in Southern Idaho one day. And then we're going to take a big, lap back and check out this. And cause you go through the Snake River Basin, you go through the Continental Divide over by Yellowstone. You obviously take in the park, you're seeing all these cool things. There's so many different landscapes you get to see, but you kind of get excited about the idea, which I think we committed to first. And then we still, as you mentioned, we had to hold down those jobs and we, which I can't believe that we did, but you start to backtrack, right? You're like, great, I love this idea. How much time do we have? You're like,
how do we make it happen?
You're like, well, I don't have a week. Like I've got 4 days. You're like, well, actually, pretty sure we got 3.5 days. It just sort of starts to get jammed,
Yeah.
So what did we do? We did an overnight. We went to mostly Eastern Idaho. We stayed at Beaver Dick Park.
I sure did. Yep.
I have not thought about that since we were there. But we stayed there on the Snake River. And then we went into the park the next day and cruised around, did our tour of that in Teton, which is obviously like remarkable. Had a really fun night at camp there on the Madison. And then we got up and blitzed it back.
Yeah.
But you got to do what you got to do, and it's probably my favorite bike trip that I've done. We had like so many insane laughs and such a good time. And you learn a lot about your traveling partners when you're traveling light and you're trying to cover big ground like that. Do you remember those big hay trucks that we were passing like in the night as we were getting into our camp in Eastern Idaho? Those big walls of air that were coming.
Yeah. In the agricultural area. Yeah. Cause we were, I think, delayed in some rural part of Idaho because there was construction or something, and I
Oh
think we
yeah, I
left
forgot.
late and everything, and it's like, okay, we only got like 50 more miles. We're gonna get there, like it's gonna happen, and then it just got darker and darker and darker, and we're in
And
farmland, and
it gets real dark out there.
there's no street lights. I remember we turned on to, what was it, Idaho 33 or something at like 7:30
Yep.
at night, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we got like an hour left, and it's like starting to get dark, and I have a tinted visor and everything, and it's like, man, I can't see anything. Like, I'm leading this kid, like he's still back
Yeah.
there. There's still a headlight, so
Yeah.
just
No,
keep on trucking.
we made it, but no, but I mean, how many good stories do we have from that, right? Like it was only
Yeah,
3 days, and we
100%.
probably have, yeah, we could talk all night about like funny stories of me, like I'm already I already took off my boots, and like there's all these like quotes that we like calling the girls when we were trying to get, you tried to go take me to get ice cream because I was being
Yep.
grumpy about like I wanted to set up a camp.
To be fair, I've heard from a few people now that like, and I've been quoted on the show before, is that once you take your boots off, that's it. So
Damn right, you're in the wrong on this one. You're like,
I was. We'll count that as strike 2 so far. But
you went against policy. But no, it was just it's things like that I think when you take advantage of your opportunities, that's what it's all about. Like it's and you were always like a good buddy that was willing to you led me in a lot of things, and I would like to think that I sort of inspired a little bit of I don't really want to call it recklessness, but like a real sort of zest for like, I have like a real craving, I can't help myself, but trying to overdo it almost all the time. And
sure.
Sometimes when you look back, you're like, man, I'm like really glad that I did that, like that. And that's one of them, we've had a few of them, but that was certainly one of them.
Well, and I think I got to say, you taught me how to rough it a little bit, and being on a motorcycle, you really do learn. Sometimes you do have to rough it. You know what I mean? And it's,
what else do you need? You know what I mean? You got something moving, you can get where you need to go. You got the clothes on your back, and you're going. Like it's all good. Like what else do you need?
and somebody mentioned the other day is that, like, one of the things I think that's special about motorcycling is that it's a like a shared experience alone, where you're both by yourself, because we didn't have Bluetooth communicators. We didn't talk or anything like that the entire time. I mean, unless we stopped for gas or stopped at, a place to eat or something like that. But we just kind of appreciated and looked at everything together, but we were kind of solo as well,
100%. And I think it's really healthy. Like what an alien experience. Like
Yeah.
people talk about this with just taking a road trip, but like
Right.
think about it on being by yourself on a motorcycle. Like it all sounds very sort of like foo and what have you, but I think it's really important. Like, when was the last time any of us went and did anything for 5 or 6 hours in pretty much silence with yourself,
Right.
where you had to focus on one thing, which is keeping yourself upright on a motorcycle?
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty rare experience nowadays. And so that was you and I sort of taking ceremony of that, and now that I look back on that, like those times gets tougher and tougher to come by. And I think it's really healthy for you to sit in your head and to think and to focus and to sort of like be present and to really, I don't know, to be firing in that sort of way is pretty rare. It gets harder and harder. So I'm glad we did it when we could.
Yeah, it's a method of solitude almost, where you are by yourself, even if you are riding with other people, but you don't have other people's thoughts and opinions or voices necessarily in your head. You really are by yourself, and there's a magic to it.
It's meditation, man. I really think it is. Like I 100% think I see it as a meditation.
Yeah.
And people get it in different ways, but
shout out to Pickles Place though.
I bought my wife a t-shirt at this restaurant in
Arco, Idaho
called Pickles Place, because I don't know, we'd been traveling, had too much whiskey the night before. We should talk about that, Mark. But we went and we stopped at this burger place on the way back, which was, I don't know, not even halfway home back to Boise, and Pickles Place. And I said, I got to get her this t-shirt. My wife absolutely loves pickles. This is the best t-shirt ever. She's going to love this. How thoughtful am I? She's going to love me,
Right.
She has no interest in pickles. I 100% made it up. She looks at me and she goes, I mean, this is a funny cartoon T-shirt, but I got nothing. I actually don't even like pickles. So apparently I was off my rocker, but yeah,
You swung for it. That's
tell the listeners, Mark, how I made you pay for it. I almost made you try for a little bit more the next morning. I tried to lengthen our trip.
Yeah. So, well, and you're forgetting, actually, we did spend an extra day between Yellowstone and heading home.
That's true.
Yeah, I will. One of the things I learned that day, riding a motorcycle hungover is not fun at all.
Should be obvious, but
it's
not.
Doable. But I mean, think about it, all you're doing is sitting there just holding on. So I was like, it's no big deal. But I also learned a lot about elevation. I tell a lot of people I have a respect for elevation. I think this is part of it. Is that when you split basically a bottle of whiskey at 9,000 feet elevation, it's going to hit you a little bit harder than normal. And, talking about overdoing it, I think the quote was, well, it's 60 miles to the next campground and we can leave now, or we can do a 106-mile loop around Yellowstone and then take another 60 miles. And I mean, literally every part of me was hurting. And tried to add in
another loop at breakfast,
and I probably would have fallen off a core. I've fallen out into a gorge or something like that. I just would have dumped it, and that would have been it. And then, we stopped in West Yellowstone, which is another great place to hit up. And
great little town.
The Slippery Otter, I believe, was the restaurant, and
saved our life. I think
I could barely keep a hamburger down. That was real touch and go for me for a minute, but.
Yeah, we definitely indulged.
That is one of my regrets, my motorcycling regrets, is that I did that. I overindulged and we were not able to do that. So,
yep. Well, next time, we're
coming. Do it again.
Let's do it again.
Just do it again. So, I mean, it was a hell of a trip. Again, it's like, I think it's the second longest trip I've ever taken.
That's great.
Is that one of the biggest trips that you have ever done on a motorcycle, or no?
So I've done a few similar, like mostly across the region. Did a pretty big loop through Oregon and Washington down the Columbia River, which is remarkably beautiful. The Blue Mountains are incredible to go up to. And then some of my favorite country in the world is central Idaho.
Sure.
So going up past McCall, Idaho, which is like more of a ski town. You could really kind of almost put that as the center point of the state, and then dropped off the backside of that into the Salmon River Breaks region and up into the Clearwater country. And it's all just like pine and spruce and like endless forests and that's that lap that we went on. That I went on that I think I've talked to you a little bit, like went up into Montana and up the Lochsaw Pass, which we drove, I think, but I did that on a motorcycle, which was remarkable. Just great country, really cool, rural riverside communities. My kind of people. I live in Boise because it's the hub, and I work out of our state capitol building quite a bit, reporting out of there. But my heart lies in the nether country.
Right.
But yeah, man. I mean, it's right up there. It's right up there. Nothing like bigger or longer or cooler. But I feel very lucky to have access to a pretty remarkable landscape that is. Very well built and sort of curated for motorcycling.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I remember, so we were in Eastern Idaho to go back to the trip a little bit. And I think we both agreed that it was like riding through a painting.
It really is.
Which is so picturesque and beautiful. And the other thing that I think that you get on a motorcycle, again, and you touched on it earlier, because you have to either stop for gas or to get a drink of water or to hit the bathroom or whatever, is that you do get a lot more exposure and experience with like Americana and like real people.
Yeah.
That you don't necessarily get driving in a car. You stop at a gas station, you run in, that's it or whatever. But
there's no
people maybe say
there's no flyover states on a motorcycle.
I love exactly.
You go right through it. And you gotta meet every one of those people at every gas station, at every campground, at whatever.
Yep.
I think that's cool. I think it's a very conscious, it's a very intentional sort of way of travel. And I think we're always hyper focused on how fast we can get somewhere to go do something else. And
yeah, it's kind of a cliche. It's that everybody says like it's about the journey, not the destination. But really, I mean, in a motorcycle, it really is about the journey because you stop more often, because your gas tank isn't as big, because you sometimes, well, most times are interact with other people. And you do get, and one of the things that I've kind of learned is that people are really a lot more friendly and nice than I think the general zeitgeist would maybe have you believe. And I feel like a motorcycle opens up kind of that or takes down that wall of conversation a little bit. People seem to be more friendly and come up to you more as a motorcyclist for some reason. I don't know if you ever experienced that or.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with that. I think that, and I'm not, this is going to sound like elitist or whatever, I guess, but I think most people are flying by. Most people are driving by, seeing the sights, doing the touristy thing, which is great, good for those businesses that are serving them, good for those people that are able to get out there. Maybe that's like what they can do. And that's awesome. But I think people are drawn to folks that have the ability to create the time to travel in such a way and to cover ground to where you are really consciously rolling through every square inch. And I just, I think a lot of people are sort of, they long for that. So I think there's absolutely a draw to it. I mean, I can't imagine that anybody listening to this podcast didn't have that or still has that experience. When you see somebody ripping down some beautiful road, you're like, man, that's bitching, like that. That's it. Like, that's it. It's very simple. Like, and I
the
think
way to do it.
Drawn to that. I'm still drawn to it.
Yeah. Well, and to tie your other interests together, I know you used to surf a little bit back in the day, and now you are a committed fisherman, an outdoorsman, sportsman. I would even say a trout enthusiast. What kind of, and you talked about it a little bit, reading rivers and stuff, but what are kind of some similarities that you maybe draw between motorcycling, surfing, fly fishing, rafting, anything like that?
I think it has a lot to do, like the word tempo comes to mind, and I think that on a motorcycle, like you may be going fast, but you're pretty exclusively focused on something. You're very present. You're very when you're running a river, when you're running a rapid in a raft or a drift boat, and you've got clients in the boat, or can you believe people let me guide them fishing nowadays? I wasn't doing that.
I actually can't. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, it's insane. I can't believe. Call me. You're focusing multiple moves ahead. You're not letting yourself get out of control. You're dealing with what's happening. You're really planning ahead. You've got your contingency plans in line. You're really not, you're not like drinking a beer, standing up, doing your thing. Like you're focused on what you're going, and whether that's making a cast to the place that that a fish's lie is, whether you're running a raft down a river, whether you're surfing and you're reading sort of the waves that are going in there. Like there's a very intense focus on reading the conditions.
Sure.
And I think that's pretty essential across the board. And for me, I'm just drawn to that moment of intersection, right? Between, it's kind of like academic, like, where you're going, you got to remember where you're going, what you're doing. Like you got to remember the lineup ahead of you. Like you're also physically reacting.
Sure.
To the conditions at hand. There's some physical discipline. You got to be skilled enough to know and practiced enough to know what you're doing. And then let's face it, all these things have a little bit of luck. That a rock doesn't fall off the wall next to you.
Sure.
That there's a fish that's, again, cosmic coincidence, is hungry, and you fooled it enough to think that fly is food for it, or whatever it may be, that wave comes your way. Cause there's an infinite depth of things that have allowed for that scenario to happen. So I'm kind of focused on those. Like, I think that's kind of what magic is, man.
That kind of reminds me of the other, and it wasn't necessarily a big trip. For me, it was kind of a harrowing trip. But when we took a trip with another friend of the podcast, Cassie Stone, on some dirt bike riding.
Shout out Cassie. She's great.
Yeah. We all used to work together, and she's killing it. She's doing,
we all escaped.
Motorcycle camps. We sure did. Thank God. And she's doing motorcycle camps and training camps for women in the Boise area for off-roading. And she, thank God for my ego, she admitted that like maybe she shouldn't have taken us on such a difficult trail up to Silver City. It was a little harrowing. But that's kind of another great trip that I just remembered. And I mean, it was funny because you took to the little dirt bike and the trail riding in the outdoors like a duck to water, and I was like, man, I got this. I've been riding for like half my life. This should be no big deal. And I mean, you kicked my ass on that one, I have to say.
That's very kind of you, Mark. And I'll take my jab very quickly and just remind all the listeners that Mark, my motorcycling mentor, we'll call, or at least a leader, leading friend, dumped it on the first hill and broke the bike for the rest of the trip. So that was, sorry, I'm just like really selling you out on this podcast.
No, that's okay.
Who else is gonna do this though?
Nobody else knows the truth.
No, that was a great day. And I don't know, you spend enough time in the mud and I think everything kind of works the same way,
Yeah. I'll tell you what, that was in retrospect, it was a very humbling moment for me. And that, just because you know how to ride one discipline is that you don't necessarily know how to ride them all. And if I've learned one thing in my motorcycle, life and in the life of the show is that, there are so many different avenues to take in the motorcycle world. There's so many different niches, so many different ways to ride, whether that's street riding or racing or dirt bikes or trail riding or adventure riding or, a little bit of both. I mean, there's so many things to go down. And you mentioned like having so much more to learn, is that I even have so much more to learn. There's always so much more to learn. If you think you know how to ride on the street, go ride a trail or go ride off road a little bit, or try a track day or something like that. I mean, there's so many different avenues down which to go. And I mean, even somebody like me who's ridden for a few years, there's still so many, things to explore and maybe a little bit of humble pie to eat as well, which is, I think, a good thing.
I think it's a super good thing. I think we don't get nearly enough of it. Like life's pretty cush. You know what I mean? Like I'm sitting here in my nice air conditioned house. It's like 150 degrees outside or something.
Yeah.
But we're here just, hanging out, talking to each other from around the country. Like things are easy. But I do think it's cool. And something that I enjoyed the motorcycling culture for was that, and this is kind of a product of me, like having that one bike, having that Scrambler, and I used it for everything. It was my commuter. It was my fun. It was a dirt bike. It was like a big, it was going from Southern California up to Lake Tahoe to go like basically meet my wife and her family. And I showed up on this bike after like blitzing through the Sierra. It's like 100 and, if it's 150 day, it was 190 on that day. I'm a little bit dramatic in case you can't tell, but I think there's something very cool about being process oriented. This is something I've been thinking a lot about recently with fishing and being process oriented. You're like, so I like to cast with those big two-handed rods. Like you see like the old school, like European big river, you're just swinging the fly along. It's not like very tactical. It's not these are big rods and long lines. And
okay.
It's not the most common sense sort of thing. It's not the most effective way to do anything. It's very on brand for me, but I like the feeling of it and I really enjoy the process. So I like to go around and I like to see how that's going to work in different places. I don't go around to different places going like, oh, well, because I'm here, I have to do this because it's the easiest or the most effective or the whatever. Being okay with like, oh, this is my bike or that I love. And this is the day that I have. So I'm going to go like, see how it goes. And I'm going to take it here.
Sure.
I'm going to climb this mountain or I'm going to do this loop. And it's about the process more than it is like the result. It's not about the goal, It's
sure.
like, and this is kind of a big metaphor for the journey, not the destination. Right. But I've been thinking about that in terms of process or product. And I think motorcycling is a lot like that. You're like, sure, it's not like perfect for that, but I love this bike, man. I love the way it feels. So let's see, like, can I get it up to the top of that hill? Can I climb up to the Continental Divide? Can I take it to the coast? Whatever. Sure. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think it's good to those challenges are fun, and it's fun to see how it works. And maybe it doesn't. And that's all learning too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just this trip I did to Sturgis, it was on my Yamaha XSR 900, and Sturgis is definitely like a Harley kind of thing and a big cruiser, thing. But even, the kind of bikes that are there at Sturgis, taking a long trip. I think my odometer at the end of that trip was 2,376 miles
Damn.
on a motorcycle
That's a
with
cross
no
country
wind.
trip.
Basically, yeah, over 8 days or so, and with no windshield, with not a lot of creature comforts. Like you said, everything on your
Good for
back or
you.
whatever. Or it was, it's a haul, but and it definitely wasn't the most optimal bike,
Yeah.
but I'm glad I did it, and it was like it was a very kind of head clearing experience, and
it's like a bond you have with that bike, right? Like
I
that's
do
the way
love
that
the
I
motorcycle
sort of felt.
even more. Yeah,
It's something that it's really connects you to what previously were just things. Now have that like ghost in the machine, sort of like it has like a real spirit.
well,
to
like
it.
it's kind of like you said, just like when the bond that you have with friends, when people that you ride with and take trips with, you do kind of have that same bond with the machine, because you're trusting it to get you to where you need to go. And there were quite a
you definitely have a relationship for sure.
Yeah, and there were quite a few moments where I was like, you know what, this little Yamaha is really a great machine, and I feel like I could literally take it anywhere now.
Yeah.
And there's a confidence and there's a trust in that, which is cool. And you really do kind of fall in love with your motorcycle a little bit that way, by putting it through a little bit of trials and tribulations that way.
Sure. Within reason, everyone, right?
Yeah, I'm not taking that motorcycle up some rocks or anything like that. In fact, I don't ever want to go up rocks ever again. Maybe somebody can teach me, but
wear your helmet.
Wear a helmet. Yeah, seriously. So, well, I think, that kind of leads me to my last question a little bit, is that, if you kind of had to sum it up, what makes motorcycling so special to you, and how kind of has it impacted, how you look at life?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think my time on my motorcycle has really allowed me access to a really important like level of focus and attention, and the ability to maintain that I don't know that I had before, even as a young adult when I got into motorcycling. And then I'll never forget that. And it also, the sort of like independent rebel spirit of the motorcycle is very cliche, right? But I think it comes with roots
Sure.
that even on the most like domestic level that I'm talking about, I was literally like riding it to work. I have a full-time job. I had a 401k, like,
Yeah.
but I think there's something special about it just being you. There's not 50 levels of security between you and the pavement or the dirt or whatever, and that it's just under your control, and you trust your own maintenance, and whether you work on your own bike or not, and you trust in the upkeep that you take, and your skills and your ability to read the conditions. I think that sort of self-reliance is important. And I have to admit also, from being somebody that's like I got clipped, and like I wound up and I had a pretty negative experience on a bike, what have you too. Like, it's like, it's good for everybody to be scared, and then to realize like, you're like, there's really big risks out there in the world, but you'll be okay. And that you're not made out of glass. Like, stuff hurts sometimes, but you're like, you'll be okay. And you can you can go and continue to live like a very full life experience. And, you don't ever wish pain on anybody, but I think a lot of people would benefit. I can only imagine that a lot of people would benefit from the experience that I had of like really having to like kind of have a comeback, and to really have that attached to riding a motorcycle, and then to be doing it again. It's a very empowering feeling. Probably causes a bit of reckless behavior in my near future. So.
Well, thanks, man. I couldn't think of anybody better to be on the podcast, so I appreciate it. And
well, thanks so much. And this has been super fun.
I can't wait for the next one. So,
Yeah, man, you got it.
All right, we'll talk soon. See ya.
See you, buddy. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts, too. Do you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure? Email us, hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.